AI Pin is probably the most controversial product of the year. Basically, a couple of ex-Apple employees came up with this idea to replace our phones with wearable screenless AI. And they even raised $250 million for this idea, and people were pumped until it actually launched. Turns out, only about 10,000 people pre-ordered, and reviews about hardware issues, confusing functionality, and poor usability led to disappointed customers, and eventually many returns. And then these rumors started that they might be looking to sell to HP for like $1 billion. Now, that's a lot to happen to any startup in just a few months. So what went wrong and what can we learn from it? And maybe the bigger question is, who is the AI Pin really for? And before we jump into it, I'm gonna try to help you understand the problem that Humane is trying to solve. Basically, Humane wants to pull us away from our screens and back into the real world. And they've been pretty clear about this goal from the start. I actually found these videos on their website titled Humane Wants to Rescue Humans from Technology, and we're creating experiences that are built on trust with interactions that feel magical and bring joy. It's in our name. And watching these really gives you a feel for what they're all about. I also found their guiding principles for AI called Good AI is Humane, where they say that good AI should be innovative, useful, efficient, ethical, trustworthy, human-centered, transparent, and inclusive. All tying back to the idea that technology should grow around you and not get in your way. And honestly, it makes sense. We're all bombarded with so much information these days that half the time we're glued to our screens. So Humane's answer to this problem is the AI Pin, a device that completely removes the screen from computing. And from 2019 all the way up to its launch in 2024, Humane did a pretty good job of building excitement. I mean, I was pretty excited because in theory, what it's supposed to do is actually pretty cool. It can project information onto your hand, it's voice controlled, and it actually understands your surroundings, so it can give you responses that make sense in the moment. What am I looking at?
You're gonna start realizing what shit costs and what it takes to make.
You are looking at a shelf full of shoes, including a pair of black Yeezy boots 350s. You are holding a phone showing a selfie.
And instead of using apps, it streams these AI experiences that activate when you talk to it. So you can browse the web, play music, send messages, take notes, translate languages, search your notes and your texts, and it even has computer vision that can help you with shopping or nutrition calculations, all through voice prompts. That is pretty amazing. And for me, the hands-free note-taking and the data recall features really stood out because I'm always on the go, and being able to say things like find my vacation photos from Europe or what was that really great idea I had last week, and getting an answer right away would just be phenomenal. That is, until I found out that the AI Pin does not connect to your phone or any other device at all, which means that you have to start rebuilding your data from scratch on the AI Pin, and the years and years of data on your phone or in the cloud is basically useless. And that's when it hit me that Humane might have just sealed their fate before they even took off, because having to juggle two different sets of data, one on the AI Pin and the other on my phone, just doesn't make sense. And then for simple things like posting on Instagram or watching a YouTube video or texting in a group chat on iMessage or WhatsApp would mean constantly juggling between the AI Pin and my phone, and I'm just not ready to commit to all of that. So could the fact that it doesn't connect with any other device be what ultimately caused the AI Pin to struggle with adoption? I mean, this was by far the biggest deal breaker for me. And when I first heard about the AI Pin, I wasn't expecting it to completely replace my phone, but I was expecting it to be the much smarter ears and eyes companion to my phone, something to add to its functionality. But instead of working with my phone, Humane wants me to ditch it completely. It's one thing to emphasize data privacy, but asking people to leave their entire tech ecosystem, whether it's with Apple, Microsoft, or Google, is a pretty big ask. I mean, we've spent years and years building these ecosystems to our personal needs with our photos, our messages, our apps, and even things like our daily routines and our habits. And for a new company to come in and say, nah, you can't bring any of that with you, feels pretty inconsiderate. So without even getting into how good or bad the AI Pin really is, I just can't get over the fact that it doesn't integrate with any of my other tech. And let's be real, in a world where most of us would not compromise convenience and functionality over security, I just don't think that many other people are going to be willing to make that trade-off. I know that I'm not. So yeah, not really a strong first impression, especially for a company that's trying to figure out its product market fit. Now, besides the compatibility issues, there were a couple other things that I didn't like, but they weren't necessarily deal breakers. Starting with the gesture controls. They are innovative and easy enough to learn, but can also feel a bit awkward. For example, to use the pin correctly, you have to hold your hand out flat and open like this. It has to be at the correct distance and height away from you. And then doing things like rotating your palm or tapping your fingers or tapping your palm or moving it in and out can feel pretty awkward. It would be nice if the projection could follow your palm, but as it is right now, you do have to hold this position for it to work right. So yeah, it is something that you could get used to over time, but it does feel uncomfortable and it does feel a lot slower than tapping your fingers on a screen. I feel like what would take 1 to 2 seconds on a screen takes about 5 to 10 seconds on the AI Pin. It's also light enough to hold at just under 60 grams with the battery booster, which is like a quarter of what an iPhone weighs, but not light enough to put on a normal t-shirt and forget that you're wearing it, which can also get uncomfortable. Also, one of the biggest complaints was about performance and speed, which in the first version that shipped was very, very bad. Lots of lagging, lots of wrong answers, and most of the time, Siri was a lot faster at finding simple things. And there were lots of complaints about the device overheating, like a lot. Just very frustrating, especially from a product at this high of a price point. And by the way, they did just reduce the price by $200 just a couple of days ago, which we will get into. But the point is that a lot of these initial issues could and should have been fixed before the initial launch, which makes you wonder what their beta testing actually look like. Now, before I dive into the price and some of the improvements they've made since launch, I do want to give credit where it's due, because one of the things that I really like about the AI Pin, and ironically, it's one of the things that makes it so pricey to begin with, is the hardware and design. This thing is as sleek and aesthetic as it gets. From the very beginning, they've branded it as a fashion meets tech product. And honestly, they delivered. The build quality is top notch. The aluminum housing, Gorilla Glass touchpad, it's just an overall beautifully designed product. Even the accessories look and feel premium. And for something this small, the amount of tech packed inside is actually impressive. A 13 megapixel wide angle camera, laser projection system, Snapdragon processor, dual microphones, 3D depth sensor, accelerometer, gyroscope, GPS, and a custom battery system, all in something about the size of an ice cube. It's just a super high-end product in terms of look, feel, and components. And honestly, if you saw it at an Apple store, you'd probably think it was an Apple product. So yeah, when you have custom-built hardware and all these advanced sensors and components, and you try to miniaturize it into this tiny little form factor, it's not going to be cheap to build. Would it have been better to prioritize lower cost, better performance, and for me, device compatibility? I think so. But in hindsight, everything is 2020, and as cliche as it sounds, making mistakes is how you learn. Lots of ideas get thrown into the market and are either accepted or rejected every single day. But what makes a successful one stand out is the ability of a very core group of people to make some really tough decisions. And how you iterate and adapt from the feedback that you collect ultimately decides whether or not you'll be successful or not. Now, Humane has some pretty big backers behind them, so they're not exactly your typical scrappy startup. But like any early stage company, they are walking a fine line between assumptions and reality, because what they assumed was going to happen didn't really pan out. So from a business perspective, how did Humane end up in this situation? Well, let's start from the beginning. From 2019 to mid-2023, they were basically building in stealth mode and raised a substantial amount of funding based on a vision. In June of 2019, they raised an undisclosed seed round by early-stage VC firm Kindred Ventures, a $30 million Series A in September of 2020, led by ex-Stripe employee turned VC Lakey Groom and Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, $100 million Series B led by investment firm Tiger Global Management, and finally another $100 million Series C, once again led by Kindred Ventures. So during this stage, they were building in secrecy, stacking capital, and building a ton of anticipation for their first product, basically by being good storytellers. In mid-2023, they unveiled the AI Pin as a smartphone killer with no screen. Pre-orders opened up in November, and they expected to have 100,000 pre-orders by launch in April, but only had 10,000 at that $699 price point. Now, to put things into perspective, the Rabbit R1 opened up pre-orders in January and got 10,000 pre-orders at a $200 price point on their very first day. By May, Rabbit had already sold over 100,000 units. And to take it way back, the very first iPhone in 2007 sold 270,000 units in its first 2 days at a $500 price point. So 10,000 pre-orders is pretty low and definitely not enough cash flow to sustain the AI Pin's initial growth phase. Now at this stage, there are no product reviews yet, so this outcome was likely due to the high price point. The cheapest AI Pin was $699 and required a $24 a month subscription. In comparison, the Rabbit R1 was $200 and didn't require a monthly subscription. So naturally, people probably took a pass on the AI Pin in hopes to wait for the reviews, which is probably why they didn't get close to the 100,000 pre-orders that they had anticipated. So they had 10,000 pre-orders by April, and now it's officially launch day. They start shipping these orders, and all of a sudden, they get slammed with complaints. By mid-2024, it became clear that the AI Pin was not living up to expectations, and it was reported that the company was seeking a $1 billion buyout from HP. At this time, John Chambers, a respected dealmaker, joined Humane's board in an attempt to stabilize the company, but the damage was just too much. July and August of 2024, all you see are negative headlines. Return rates are outpacing sales with an estimated 6,000 to 7,000 pins still in circulation. Which brings us to today, where they just cut their price to $499, but it's still unclear if Humane can recover or not. An overall pretty scary position to be in as a startup. Even with the high price point, they still managed to get 10,000 orders, which is at least $8 million in initial revenue, and then $240,000 a month in subscription revenue, but not if you can't keep your customers. If only the tech had lived up to all of its promises, the initial customer reviews might not have been so bad. So the billion-dollar question is, how can Humane dig themselves out of this hole? Or in other words, how can startups use feedback to pivot and grow in the right direction? And to attempt to answer that question, let's focus on the top 5 complaints made by customers and see how Humane has responded since. Number 1 is unreliable performance. Voice recognition was inconsistent, responses were slow and inaccurate, and it didn't integrate well with other services. Number 2 is a confusing interface. Without a screen and relying on voice commands or a laser display, the device was harder to use compared to smartphones. Number 3 is frequent technical problems, such as hardware failures, software glitches, overheating, charging case risks, and fast battery drain. Number 4 was the price. At $699 plus a subscription fee, many felt it wasn't worth the price. And I'm not sure that $499 will make things much better. Number 5 is the failed promise. It did not replace smartphones. The device did not live up to being a smartphone replacement or even an accessory. And now here's how they've responded to all of this feedback. They've had 2 major software updates, 1.1.3 and 1.1.4, along with lots of smaller updates and bug fixes where they've improved AI mic latency and speech recognition accuracy by 20%, increased battery life by 25%, enhanced signal strength and reliability, and boosted thermal performance by 3x. And there's tons of more features and improvements that are planned for the future. So with these updates, they've already tackled a good chunk of the top 5 complaints. Now, integrating with a broader ecosystem is likely a more complex challenge, but they could be working on it right now. In fact, they did recently add Catch Me Up on other devices as part of their developmental roadmap, so it does look like the beginning of a more widely integrated AI Pin. As for the user interface, that's probably not something that they're going to change soon because that is one of the device's unique selling points. Now, the price is something that I did not think they could reduce unless they invested in sourcing cheaper materials to build a more affordable product, but somehow they recently slashed $200 off the retail price. I'm not sure how they did that, and I'm not sure if that's really going to give them higher sales or just tick off the ones that paid $700 for it, but I guess it's worth a shot. Next is the subscription model. I think if they can establish a strong ecosystem integration and connect to other devices via Bluetooth, like most of the wearables, then they might be able to eliminate the subscription fee or at least make it optional. So you could pay to use Humane's exclusive ecosystem with a dedicated separate line, or use it for free by connecting to a smartphone of your choice, like all other wearables. Either way, dropping the price, which they've done, and making the subscription optional would at least help them get more customers and help them make forward progress. Which brings us to the failed promise. One of the biggest mistakes that most startups make is overpromising to their audience. They claim that their product can solve every problem and make you completely dependent on it by replacing everything else. Humane's original promise was pretty bold, that the AI Pin would be the ultimate wearable AI assistant that would reduce our dependence on screens and ultimately replace our smartphones. This kind of claim makes for great marketing material, but it also assumes a few key risky things. Number one, that people are ready to give up screens, and number two, that privacy matters more than usability and compatibility. And these assumptions can be dangerous if the market doesn't validate them, because based on the results, people don't seem to be ready to completely give up screens, and they don't seem willing to prioritize privacy at the expense of usability and compatibility. As a result, the AI Pin did not replace smartphones. And in my opinion, it never even had the chance to replace smartphones, let alone gain significant traction, because it never integrated with smartphones or any other technology to begin with, which ruled out a lot of people that would have actually given it a shot, like me. Would it not have been better to say that you want to reduce people's dependence on screens by releasing a product that connects to devices that have screens, but then slowly show them how your device makes them use that screen less, which would slowly prove your assumption? But no, Humane gave us a product that works only as a standalone device, forcing us to ditch everything else and start completely from scratch, and promised us a screenless future by placing a less functional version of a screen on our palm. So yeah, being first to market with a radical new idea is great, but please don't give your customers an ultimatum right off the bat. Give them the freedom to integrate into their lifestyle first, and then let them adapt to your vision over time. But hey, after raising $230 million, you can practically promise whatever you want, right? Not exactly. No matter how much money you raise, it's always best to thoroughly test your assumptions. For Humane, this would have been back when they were in stealth mode, and personally, I would love to see that data to see what the consumer feedback looked like. Anyways, lessons learned from all of this. Hype does not guarantee success. Building excitement through secrecy and marketing can create buzz, but it also sets very high expectations that are hard to meet. Number two, user experience is critical. A futuristic concept can flop if it doesn't align with user habits. The AI Pin faced criticism for being awkward and hard to use due to its screenless design and voice interface. Number three, test and iterate before launch. Humane might have benefited from more thorough beta testing and refinement before launching at scale. Hype is great, but only if the product has been properly tested with its target audience. If not, keep gathering feedback and improving. Number four, pricing matters. To charge a premium price, you need to offer clear value from the start. Humane missed the mark here, with many feeling the AI Pin did not justify its high price. And number five, do not force users to abandon existing tech. It's risky to demand users to ditch their current technology without offering a smooth and compelling transition. Consumers invest a lot of time and trust in the devices that they use daily, and startups should consider offering integration options with existing tech when possible. Once again, I would have loved to have the option to integrate it with my other devices first, and over time see if it could replace certain phone functions. But hey, I'm just a consumer, what do I know? So what's next for the AI Pin? They have two options. They can pivot and adapt, or they can explore other options. They could take the feedback and criticism and return to the drawing board and improve the AI Pin. This seems to be the direction they're heading, and it's what I hope for because I still believe this product has potential. In the right form, it could become a very useful tool for the right audience. And while they do all of this, they can explore other options. As a startup with investors, Humane has a financial responsibility to consider various possibilities. One option could be leveraging their intellectual property or their IP, which could be valuable to other companies. For example, a company like HP might be interested in structuring a deal with Humane incorporating the AI Pin's technology into their products. This could give HP a competitive edge while allowing Humane to continue developing new ideas and keeping the business alive. It's a win-win. The product evolves and Humane gets to keep the lights on and continue working on more products. Personally, I do still think that Humane has a strong potential as a brand, and it would be nice to see them find a home with consumers for the AI Pin, but one product doesn't necessarily have to define or end the company. Maybe instead of competing with smartphones, they could add the integration functionality and compete with smartwatches. Or they could work on something new, especially since they do have a good team that listens to feedback and seems like they're really capable of adapting. And with all of that being said, let's try to figure out who the AI Pin is really for. And honestly, in my humble opinion, I do think that Humane is still trying to figure that out for themselves, because it's hard to tell what specific problem the AI Pin is solving and for whom. Is it designed for screen-weary users, privacy-conscious individuals, busy professionals looking for a productivity boost, or maybe it's for accessibility-focused consumers? The problem is that they launched the AI Pin to a very broad audience, assuming that the entire tech world would embrace it, but without a clear niche, it's hard to see where it fits in. And once again, personally, I can see it competing really well if they can get it to pair and use the data on my phone. So should anyone still buy the AI Pin today? Personally, I think it overlaps too much with what your smartphone already does. And spending $787 in the first year and then $288 a year after that is pretty hard to justify. Another factor is the growing competition. Google Gemini, Apple Intelligence, Microsoft Copilot are all capable of offering very similar AI-driven features. And these platforms are already integrating AI into your existing devices, pulling from your photos, your calendar, your messages, and your emails to deliver personalized responses. And with these big competitors around, do we really need a separate wearable device to do the same thing? Clearly, Humane has some important decisions to make regarding the AI Pin's future. They have shown a willingness to listen to feedback and make improvements, but they do need to take it a step forward if they want to regain consumer interest. So yeah, thanks for sticking around and listening to my thoughts. Let me know what you think about the AI Pin in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.